I've been doing environmental contamination cases for about 20 years now. I've talked to literally hundreds of families who've gotten the bad news that there is something dangerous, some dangerous chemical in their water or in their air or in the dirt, in the soil surrounding their home, maybe that their children play in. And what I've learned over that process in talking to these people and being their lawyer in court, what I've learned is that there are certain questions that immediately spring to their mind, and then on top of that there are other questions that they eventually realize they need to be asking in order to make the kind of decisions that they need to make to protect their home, to protect their family, to make good decisions about the situation they've suddenly found themselves to be in. So I've compiled that list of questions. I have 10 of them, and they're in no particular order. They're all very, very important, but I have 10 questions that people in this circumstance should be asking and should be getting answers to. I'd like to go through them now. So the first question is, what is the chemical now that's in my water or in my air or in my soil, and how dangerous is it? Depending on the kind of chemical it is, the dangers can be very extreme to very minimal. There's a family of chemicals, for example, known as volatile organic compounds. One is TCE, one is PCE, vinyl chloride. You may have heard of some of those. Those have been studied for years and their dangers are fairly well known. Others, not so well known. So you need to understand, you need to insist on learning and being told what specifically is the chemicals, or sometimes it's more than one, that are driving this risk, because then you can start to get answers to what you really want to know here when you learn about what chemical you're dealing with, is how dangerous is it. Many of these chemicals, fairly recent science has told us, are more dangerous to children, more dangerous in the bodies of children than in adults. Why is that? Because children's immune systems are not well formed and they don't process toxins as efficiently as adults' immune systems process toxins. So if you're dealing with one of those chemicals, you especially want to know that, because then it will drive what kind of protections you need to insist on for your family and especially your kids. Question number 2, how long has that chemical been coming into my home? How long has my family been exposed to this chemical? Now, why do you want to know that? Fairly obvious, really. For most of these dangerous chemicals, the longer the exposure, the greater the danger. Once again, especially for children. Another reason that you want to know this is that it is not always obvious. Some of these chemicals, TCE is one, and the family of chemicals in which TCE finds itself, are typically colorless and odorless. So it can be in your water, you don't taste it. It can be in the air in your home and you don't smell it. So you need someone else to tell you. And there are people who can tell you. How long has this chemical been in the presence of my family? And then that drives the concern that you would have about health issues. Question number 3, will I still be able to sell my home? Well, it really depends. If you think about it from the standpoint of someone who's thinking of buying a home, and let's say, to make it simple, you're looking at 2 homes, and they're essentially identical, although one is a neighborhood where there's been contamination, and the other is a neighborhood where there hasn't been any contamination. You know which one you're going to prefer and even be willing to pay more money for. So there's no question, in my experience and in all the studies I've ever read, that when there is contamination in a neighborhood, under a home, especially coming into a home, that's really going to hurt the price of the home, sometimes so much that at least until that problem is solved, the home is not sellable. So I think what you should assume is that there is a serious contamination problem in your neighborhood, or even threat of contamination. There's going to be a period of time where your home is not going to be sellable, or it's not going to be sellable without a huge discount. That what's going to happen before your home can be sold at a fair price is that threat of contamination is going to have to be eliminated. You're going to have to be able to say, honestly, there isn't a threat anymore. You'd have to be able to say that honestly to somebody thinking of buying your home. So, very strong connection between contamination and whether you can sell your home. It's one of the reasons. First is health, second is this, why you want to aggressively get after this contamination and get it out of the presence of your family. Question number 4, who is the polluter? Who did this? Now, this is more than just curiosity. One of the reasons why you want to know who did this is because you want to know if whoever did it has the financial wherewithal to fix it. Some of these problems are years, even decades in the making. In many cases I've been involved in, the families are told about contamination, say, coming into their home out of their tap in the water, and it's because of chemicals that were dumped 50 years ago by a polluter. Many of those polluters who dumped the chemicals 50 years ago, they don't exist anymore. Maybe they've gone bankrupt, they're just out of business, they got bought by somebody else. Who is the polluter? Who did this? Is there someone still around who is legally responsible to deal with the pollution and to make your family safe, to clean up this problem? Who is it? That's question number 4. Very important. Question number 5. Whoever the polluter is, how long has the polluter known about this? One of the really frustrating things, really angering things for the families that I represent is when they find out how long ago it was before they were told that the polluter up the street or the polluter even a mile or 2 away dumped the chemicals and knew of the threat to surrounding homes but didn't tell anybody. You want to know when the polluter first did the things that are now causing a threat in your home. And why do you want to know that? Well, we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get further down our list, but that's real leverage for you. The longer the polluter has known, the worse the polluter looks for not cleaning up the problem, for not telling you about it, for allowing your family to now be at risk, and that creates leverage for you in your court case in the courtroom. Question number 6. Question number 5, remember, was how long is the polluter known? Question number 6, similar question, but focused a little differently. How long has your government known? Now, this one may not be obvious to you, but I'll tell you what I've learned from my almost 20 years of experience with this is, in most of these contamination cases, somebody in government has known. Typically a government agency. Maybe it's the United States Environmental Protection Agency, maybe it's a state EPA. They have different names, but essentially it's the state or federal agency which is supposed to be protecting your family's health and your property. Oftentimes, they have known about the problem for years, they've known about the threat for years, but they haven't told you about it, just like the polluter. It's really galling, especially when you think about the fact that you're paying taxes for this agency to protect you, and actually what they're doing is help the polluter keep you in the dark. Now, why do you want to know that? Because you want to put a lot of pressure on the agency that's supposed to be protecting you to fix this. You want to go to them and with your neighbors who are also commonly affected by this problem and say, why haven't you protected me? You need to get moving now with extra urgency to protect me, to do the job you should have been doing for years. It's leverage against that government agency too. How long did your government know? Question number 7. Can the contamination be cleaned up? Most of the time, the answer is yes, or at least significantly so. But sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes if the contamination has been allowed to spread throughout the environment for a long enough period of time, then as a practical matter, it can't be cleaned up. And the best that can be done is to try to keep it from coming into contact with human beings, but sometimes the contamination is just left in the environment because as a practical matter, there's nothing that can be done because it's been allowed to sit there for so long. So you want to know, can it be cleaned up? Because if we go back to one of our earlier questions about can I sell my home? Whether this contamination can be cleaned up and cleaned up in the reasonably near future has a lot to do with whether you're going to be able to sell your home and for how much. Another question is, who's going to clean it up? Who's really what you're talking about, who's going to pay for this? Once again, if the polluter is bankrupt, doesn't exist anymore, doesn't have the money to clean it up, obviously that's going to be a problem. Because more and more government is out of the business of these cleanups. There's not a lot of money laying around in government to clean up huge environmental problems. So if you have the horrible misfortune of learning that there's contamination in your water, in your soil, and the air inside your home, what you hope for is that the polluter is still around and financially viable and can pay for it, because these kinds of cleanups can be enormously expensive, easily into the millions and millions of dollars, sometimes tens of millions of dollars, depending on how big a problem it was, how big a chemical spill it was in the beginning, how long it's been allowed to just sit there and bleed through the environment wherever it will go. So can it be cleaned up? Who will do it? Who's going to pay for it? Has a lot to do with whether the polluter is still around. All right, next question now. How long is it going to take to clean the contamination up? Well, once again, it depends, and it depends on a lot of the things that I just talked about. How far has it spread? How long has it been allowed to sit there? This is an area, how long it's going to take to clean up the contamination is an area where you and your neighbors, whoever's affected by these problems, can really make a difference, can really put pressure on government, on the polluter, go to the media, yell and scream, demand attention, demand resources, be dedicated to this cleanup. Because I've seen cleanups, and you may have heard about cleanups, but there are notorious cleanups in this country which literally have taken half a century from the time the problem was first discovered until the problem was finally cleaned up. Decades, at least. A lot of cleanups take decades. Very few of them take months. Oftentimes it's many, many years. This is an area where you can have impact if you really make yourself noisy and insist on urgency. Okay, next question. How do I protect my family right now? And this is maybe one of the absolutely most important questions on this list. It depends on how the contamination is coming into contact with you and the members of your family. Let's say, for example, it's coming out of the spigot at your sink when you prepare food or pour yourself a glass of water, for example. Well, bottled water might be a solution. It's a short-term solution, but if you can satisfy most of your needs for water in the home with bottled water, while hopefully someone else is cleaning up the source of the contamination, you can gain a good deal of protection there. I even know families who've been advised, and it's good advice, where, for example, if contamination is coming out of the shower head, to take shorter showers or to take baths instead. One of the things about a bath is that the contamination will evaporate sometimes out of the bath water, whereas in the shower, if you take a hot shower like everybody does, the steam comes into contact with your skin and can absorb through the skin into your body and also through your nostrils as you're breathing it. So showers can actually be a great danger if you've got chemicals coming out of the shower head. So you can shorten up showers, you can use bottled water. Short-term protections which you can use, as I say, in the very near term. But ultimately what has to be done to protect your family is you've either got to get your family out of that home, away from the contamination, if you can afford it, if you have other options, or you've got to demand the quickest possible cleanup. Sometimes, for example, I've had the experience where I've represented families who are on well water, and the water coming into their home, which is contaminated, is coming from the contaminated aquifer right below their home. But we were able to get the polluter to finance the piping in of clean water, let's say from a nearby community which has clean water, and they fashion a piping system and they bring the clean water over to the contaminated neighborhood. That's another way to protect your family. But that requires effort, because, as I say, making noise, and all of these things. All of these questions here, let me talk about one question really I haven't asked, but it maybe ought to be at the very top of your list, is, do I need a lawyer? That's one simple. The answer is yes. I hope that by walking through all of these questions and dealing with some of the complexity that you can now see, I hope you can appreciate this is not something that you ought to be doing by yourself. You shouldn't be tackling complicated science and legal questions all by yourself and up against a polluter that may have its own team of scientists and lawyers to make an argument, to make a case for itself. That you shouldn't try to tackle government all by yourself. You really need someone who understands all of this, who understands how to get answered the questions you need answered, and understands how to create leverage and build a case for you, So that these really important things like protecting your family, cleaning up the environment so that you can sell your home and feel at peace again about the safety of your home for yourself and your family, so you can get these kinds of questions addressed in a way that works best for you, that is going to require a lawyer. And one of the very first things you should do is research and find a good lawyer who's experienced in this area, who can go to bat for you, because you're going to need it.